Can you imagine being able to see without using your physical eyes? Can you? I know this is mind-boggling to most, but I recently interviewed a woman named Dalia Burgoin, just this last episode, who can do just that. She sees without her eyes. She can see colors and shapes. She can even read text. And she's not the only one that can do this, by the way. There have been many children that have been tested and actually filmed while reading books, all while being double blindfolded. There have been others who have claimed such abilities as well, and some are actually noted in documented history. But my question is, what is the true catalyst that's making this possible? How is this going on? Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. One of the things that struck me most about my conversation with Dahlia wasn't just her daughter's telepathic abilities, but something that many of you commented on after that episode aired, and that is her ability to see without her eyes. It's called mindsight, or some people have called it eyeless sight. And as she was explaining how this incredible ability came to her, there was a fascinating common denominator that I picked up on, and that is the sun. She mentioned it, the sun. She said that the moment it activated for her, it wasn't in darkness, but in sunlight. And suddenly she was able to perceive shapes and colors. And she said what was even behind her, she could see, all while blindfolded with this blackout mask. I want you to watch this clip and we'll come back and pick this up.
It actually happened. I went to meditate with the blindfold, and the vision or whatever that was, it actually made me want to put the blindfold on when I lay down. And then my daughter was there, and then after I sat up after the meditation, it actually happened. But it was only that one day, and I remember thinking, okay, I need to figure out how to do this. And
Mm,
so, because
mm,
it was only that one time, and so I remember walking around for 6 months, and it was just a pitch black mask. But I noticed I started seeing outlines, and it was really cool. It was really fun. But I call it my dark practice, my dark walking. And so I would just walk around and see outlines. I was able to get around everywhere, but I could not figure out the light part. And I was like, why
mm.
is the kids in Indonesia? How come they can read and stuff? And I couldn't figure it out. And then I remember going to the seminar that I went to, and and I opened the second day, and I figured it out. I was like, I figured out. We sat in the sun, and the sun activated. And that's what I wasn't doing before. That's the only thing that made it different. Was before I was always in the dark, and this time I was in the sun, and the sun activated it.
So after hearing her describe her own increased mindsight abilities and how she discovered she could do this, we got some great comments around the subject, and I want to read one of them to you right now, and then we're going to get further into this. This is from 5D Life 318, who wrote, I was sitting in my car, napping during a break at work one time, and I awakened. I didn't open my eyes right away, but I did see my steering wheel, my dashboard, and other things in front of me. My eyes were still closed. It shocked me and excited me at the same time. This experience is not consistent with me, but it seems to happen when I'm in the sun and in an alpha brain state. I also heard someone's thoughts while waking. I was riding on a Greyhound bus headed home, and I was hearing Spanish. I looked around and saw that everyone was asleep. It was astounding. So this person mentioned both mindsight and apparent telepathy. So the two may very well be linked, but I want to focus today on vision without eyes and some of these common denominators. Now, what's fascinating here is that both Dahlia and this viewer describe one of the same features, and that's the presence of the sun. Neither of them were apparently looking directly at it. In fact, I'm sure they weren't looking directly at it. But something about being in sunlight seemed to activate this ability to see without eyes. And notice what else this person mentioned. They said the alpha brain state, that twilight zone, you've heard of it, between waking and sleeping. It's sometimes called hypnagogia. This is a state where our brain waves slow down, where imagination and intuition can actually be heightened, and where extraordinary perceptions can often, forgive the pun, come to light. Now, I'll tell you, I've had this happen to me. I've had many, many incredible insights and almost sort of a lucid state, in a dream state, I should say, but it was a hypnagogic state. So my question is, what's going on here? As far as the sun is concerned, could it be acting as more than just a source of light for our physical eyes? Could it actually be fueling a completely different sensory system? Now, science has already shown that our bodies do emit and even seem to detect light at really subtle levels. It's something that researchers call biophotons. And there are many ancient traditions as well that have linked the sun to inner vision. You've got ancient sun gazing practices that assist in, they say, opening the third eye. And then, of course, in ancient Egypt, it's talked about a lot. The sun was personified as Ra, the source of all life and illumination. You've got the eye of Horus, the symbol, the eye of Horus, which many see as linked to the pineal gland, the third eye, representing spiritual sight and a form of protection. So, in connecting that, what if mindsight is less about seeing with our eyes and more about consciousness that actually syncs with light itself, whether we visibly see the light or not? I mean, when Dalia mentioned that even though she was in the presence of the sun, she couldn't see it. She was wearing these blackout blindfold masks. So clearly, and I remember being in the conversation with her, and I said, "Well, was the sun kind of casting some kind of a faint glow, or were you able to get some of that sunlight through the blindfold?" And she said, "Absolutely not. It was still completely blackout for me." So my question is, what if the sun acts more like a key that unlocks a perception that's always been there for us, but typically it's hidden from our everyday awareness? I mean, I'll tell you about the sun. I have always had a love for the sun, y'all. In fact, I'll admit, I speak to it all the time. I thank it. I have respect for it. And not just for its life-giving qualities. Obviously, it's what's keeping us alive. But there's something to me always has been quite sacred about the sun. I just kind of feel it. I'm curious as to whether you feel that as well. And so, as we look at the potential of what the sun can do to possibly assist in elevating our own very unique psychic abilities, I think we all have them, like being able to see without the use of our eyes, or possibly activating our pineal gland, and goodness knows what else. We're talking about human and spiritual evolution. I want to pause on this for a minute because it's important. We're talking about the activation of what I would say are innate potential and limitless potential. And this is key, our individual power, our individual power. Now I'm going to touch on this briefly. As I was preparing this, I thought of whether I should bring this up or not, but I'm going to go there. Let's think about this. When you're talking about how empowering the sun can be to all of us as a species, not just by keeping us alive, but possibly literally activating us as higher beings, you have to ask, is it any wonder why some interests, we'll just leave it as interests, are consistently warning us about the dangers of the sun, trying to convince us it's not good for us, as if it's a bad thing, possibly a catalyst of I don't know, global warming, climate change, maybe. No, look, I'm not going to harp on this, and I don't want to get political or conspiratorial, but I have to go there just for a minute. I mean, look, we know that there have been efforts to dim the sun through technologies like geoengineering for many years. I covered it many years ago. And in more recent years, the media hasn't been too hesitant, frankly, in coming out with some of these headlines. I want you to take a look at a few that I found. Here's one from Politico that just came out last month, and it says, you can see the headline here, researchers quietly planned a test to dim sunlight. They wanted to avoid scaring the public. And here's another one I'm going to show you. In 2023, BBC published this article with a headline, "To Avert Climate Disaster, What If One Rogue Nation Dimmed the Sun?" And I'm going to give you one more. This is back in 2022. And I know there have been some that have been even earlier than this, but this from 2022. The New Yorker says, dimming the sun to cool the planet is a desperate idea, yet we're inching toward it. So there you have it. They're not keeping it a secret, although there seems to be a bit of trepidation or hesitation on just how much they want to tell. But honestly, I've often asked the question, what's really behind this push to dim the sun? And I can't say for sure. It's a plan to snatch away our potential to evolve into fully activated humans. But I'll be frank, this isn't the first time I've pondered the idea, sad as this would be. So I'll leave it there. Now, I don't want to lose sight of what we're here to talk about. This is important. And that is the idea that we can see without the use of our physical eyes. I find this whole idea fascinating. To you, especially when you think about the typical, and this is important. I actually covered this on the History Channel several years ago for Proof is Out There. The typical range of physical vision that we humans have is teeny. It's minuscule. We can only detect wavelengths, I should say, of roughly, I want to say between 350 to 380 up to 750-ish nanometers for any of you that understand how teeny that is. That's less than 1% of the total electromagnetic spectrum. That's nothing. So could the sun, is my question, could the sun be key to perceiving beyond that spectrum? Is that what the ancients knew? And it got me to thinking about this. Let's look at this for a minute. What's actually going on when we happen to see a phantom or a ghostly figure or a ball of light? We can call it an orb that we often see peripherally, but sometimes you can see it straight on. Apparently, what's happening is we're glimpsing something outside of that visible spectrum, or maybe that which we are seeing is entering our visible spectrum. Either way, something fascinating is going on. So I'm trying to doing a little dot connecting here, y'all. You know, I love to do that. But where we certainly can't say for sure that the sun is the cause of this, or the sole cause, even if it's nighttime, though, this is an important point. Even if it's nighttime, after the sun has set, and these sorts of phenomena often occur, surely the sun is still in our sky. It's just that the sun is out of our view from our vantage point at night. Now, let's also look at some of the phenomena that are said to occur during high solar activity, like a geomagnetic storm. I've covered this before. Lynn McTaggart, who wrote the book The Intention Experiment, which I love, talked about how psychic ability can increase during these, as she called it, noisy periods during an active solar pattern. Now, I had a conversation, speaking of that, with researcher Susan Manowich sometime, I think it was last year, where she was telling us about a message that now listen to this, received from her deceased father about the sun and contacting the afterlife. I want you to hear this clip.
What I'm calling, solar activity and people's evolutionary adaptive abilities, meaning evolutionary adaptive abilities such as psychic awareness, connection, intuitive capacities that are here to help and aid in our evolutionary growth. When the solar activity seems to hit, like when we get what's called a geomagnetic storm, when that actually impacts the earth and impacts this thing called the KP index, you see that more of a manifestation in the physical at that point. My father, who had passed away 7 years ago, was I was really close to my dad. Like, we had a great, funny relationship. And, he always made a joke. He said, "I'm going to come back and haunt all of you, afterwards." He was just funny. So it was interesting because I literally woke up in the morning and I'm so sensitive to the solar activity. So I could feel like the geomagnetic storm it was hitting. And I hear him, and like, as I'm waking up, I hear him say, "How come nobody calls me?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean? Don't you guys realize that when these types of things happen, meaning the solar activity, that the things are more clear for me to communicate and for you to communicate. So why don't you just pick up the phone and call? You could reach out and contact." And so, I mean, obviously we need more evidence at that point, but I think what we're learning is that these solar activities are legit energy that is, impacting us. But like you said, conversely, we can put things out as well.
I think Susan said it all. This is what we're talking about here. She was describing how during times of high solar activity, specifically during geomagnetic storms, our psychic and intuitive capacities may actually heighten. This is the same thing that Lynn McTaggart was able to deduce from her research. Now, Susan actually had a direct experience, she says, with her deceased father, who came through to her during one of these storms, joking that no one ever calls him when the solar energy makes the connection so much clearer. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? In any case, the suggestion here is huge, you guys. These bursts of solar energy, they're not just space weather, maybe. They may be amplifying our evolutionary abilities, our intuition, and even our ability to communicate with the non-physical realms. So if the sun's activity can thin the veil in this way, then this idea of mindsight and other forms of perception beyond the eyes are part of the same larger pattern of consciousness, of our consciousness, I should say, responding to the energy of the sun. Now, I'm not saying that this is the only way we can perceive without the use of our eyes. In fact, in my interview with Dalia, she questioned whether, we have receptors in our skin, and they may also play a role. You may recall if you saw the show, and of course, I'll have a link, that I had mentioned two cases during our interview where one Russian woman could apparently see through her fingertips, and another case that was studied of twins from Beijing, China, who reported that they could see through their armpits. I thought that was quite humorous, but that's what they said. I mean, look, here's the bottom line. We're still just beginning to understand how this temple of ours, our bodies work, not to mention the huge mysteries still surrounding the true role of our brain, because I know that plays an integral role as well. But whatever the case, whatever it is, and however we're able to perceive outside of this visible spectrum that we usually occupy, one thing I'm sure of, we're barely scratching the surface about this limitless capacity, barely. And I think Dalia and people like her have shown that. There's so much we can do, you guys. And I'm excited we're starting to take these conversations more seriously. Thanks in large part to you. Thank you so much. And to people like Dalia and all the people that I met at the Psy Games a couple of weeks ago. I'll say it again. The idea that the sun may be playing a co-starring role, possibly, in our own evolutionary development, that's exciting stuff. And no matter what they say, the proverbial they, about the sun, framing it almost as the enemy in some cases, I'm going to continue cheering for the sun. I'm going to continue respecting it and speaking to it as if it's conscious, because I believe it is, and expressing my gratitude for the sun. And then, again, as I was writing this up, I was thinking, the sun is soul, SOL, and SOL equals soul, SOUL to me. Now, of course, I'd love to get your thoughts on whether or not you think the sun may be playing a role. And by the way, I want to thank the viewer that left that comment. I'd love to hear more about your experiences with being able to see without your eyes, if this has happened more than once. But again, the role that the sun might be playing in things like mindsight and other psychic abilities. And I'd love to hear more of your stories, around elevated psychic abilities in general. So please drop me a comment below. Now, before I leave, speaking of psychic abilities, I've been into this a lot lately. I recently launched a series over on my website, higherjourneys.com, called Psychic Insights, where I probe some of these questions like what we're talking about today and unpack some of the methods that we can put to use to enhance and hone our intuitive skills. This is all about personal transformation. I believe we're on the verge of something big. So I thought I would launch a series kind of probing some of these things. So 2 weeks ago, I posted an article covering Mercury retrograde and some of the lesser known things that are associated with the planet Mercury when it appears to be reversing course. We're always focusing on things that we shouldn't be doing, like signing contracts and, getting into any kind of major commitment of any kind. However, there are definitely some practices or insights that we can harness positively when we're right smack in the middle of a Mercury retrograde. We just ended one about a week or so ago. So that was the first post. And then I recently posted about how, speaking of psychic abilities, just how being around people that have psychic abilities can, in some cases, rub off on us. So I asked the question and I explore the possibility that just being in the presence of a highly sensitive person, could that activate our innate psychic sense? In fact, I actually mentioned that in my interview with Dalia, because I felt that after meeting her, along with a bunch of other people, psychically talented individuals that were called perceptualists at the Psy Games, I really felt, and I still feel, that those several days of being with them opened up something in me. Now, I've always had a somewhat of a proclivity to, let's just say, a sensitivity and an intuitive sense. But you guys, I'm telling you the God's honest truth. When I left that conference, it was off the charts for me. So that's the question that I posed, and that I kind of use that as the impetus to write that article. It's quite good. So anyway, I want you to head on over to higherjourneys.com/psychic insights, bookmark it so you can follow along with the series. It's a 5-part series for now. I may add a few more later, but it's loaded with great questions, which I love to ask, bunch of research that I was able to probe and dig into, and also a bunch of how-tos when it comes to raising your psychic sensitivity. So go check that out. Okay, that's it for now, y'all. Thank you for tuning in. And again, let me hear from you. Let me know more. I'm so excited about the interview that we did with Dalia, and I'm so glad that it touched and reached so many of you. Thank you for that. So keep it coming, y'all. Okay, we will talk to you soon. Oh, before I go, I want to let you know I am taking next week off from doing a show because I'm working on yet another project that, of course, I'll share with you a little bit later. Yeah, a little bit later. But we'll have next week off, and then we will be back the following week with a brand new guest. All right, everyone. I will talk to you soon. Take care.